Previously, we learned how to allow the user to set variables using the input functions. These are really handy, but I think they make more sense if you want to ask the user for something in the middle of the program's execution, similar to what the social engineering toolkit does. However, for a simple program like this, it would make more sense to get our user to input values as arguments. By arguments, I mean it would be ideal if we could allow the user to do something like Python MacChanger, py, then pass the values using options like interface, setting it to lon0, and specifying the new MAC address. Now, if we actually want to implement something like this, it's not going to be easy. First, we need to implement a way of reading everything that comes after the command. We also need to read the option names or arguments and their values, such as lon0 and the new MAC address. Additionally, we need to display a help message for users who don't provide arguments. For example, with known commands, if you just type ifconfig help, you get a long menu showing the help information and how to use all the arguments that come with the ifconfig command. Now, you could write all of this yourself, or you could use an existing Python module. That's what we're going to do here. To use a module, such as subprocess, we need to import it. So, to import a module, we'll type import module_name, which in this case is Optparse. Optparse is the module that allows us to get arguments from the user, parse them, and use them in our code. Importing the module doesn't mean that your program will automatically use it. As you can see, it's actually written in gray right now, and it indicates that it's unused because we haven't used this module in our code yet. When you import something, you're telling Python that you plan to use code within that module, but you still need to call it within your code to make it functional, just like we called subprocess in this example. The next step is to call this module and get our program to recognize and parse user input. To do this, we're going to create a parser object. You can think of this object as an entity or a person that knows everything about parsing arguments and can handle them on its own. So, this entity will handle user input for us. To create this object, we'll use the line parser equals optparse.OptionParser. Here, parser is just a variable, similar to interface or new_Mac. The difference is that the value it holds is different from the ones held here. For example, interface holds whatever value is returned by raw_input, which returns what the user enters, typically a string for the interface name. On the other hand, parser will hold the value returned by Optparse.OptionParser. Notice that OptionParser starts with a capital letter, which is a naming convention in Python that indicates a class. A class is basically code, a set of rules, or a blueprint for the object. It determines what we can do with the parser object. This includes all the code to read user input, display help messages, and store values entered by the user. All of it is in the OptionParser class. However, you can't use the class as is. You need to create an instance of that class, which is what we're doing here. We're creating an object stored in the parser variable. We'll be using objects a lot throughout this course, and as we go along, they'll become clearer. So now, we've created an instance of the OptionParser class, which is an object that can handle parsing for us. Think of this parser object as a child. It inherits all the abilities of its parent class to handle parsing, but since it's a child, we still need to specify what kind of arguments it should look for and how to handle them. We'll start by teaching this child by doing parser.add_option. Here, we're defining the first argument that it should expect from users. This argument will be I to specify the interface. We're also going to allow the user to use either I or interface to specify the interface. Then, we'll use dest equals interface. The dest parameter tells Python where to store the value of the interface, making it easier to retrieve the user input. Let's keep going, and it will become clearer as we move forward. Finally, we'll give it a help message to display to the user if they need assistance, and we'll set that to say, interface to change its MAC address. So far, it's very simple. We're just instructing the parser object by telling it to expect a value under I or interface. Whatever value the user enters will be stored under interface, and if help is required, it will display this help message. Finally, we'll instruct this child object to parse the arguments it receives from the user. To do this, we'll use parser parse_args. If you press the .py charm will show you all the methods available for this object. We just want it to understand what it's got so far, so we'll ask it to parse arguments. Now, let's run our program. I'll type Python macchanger, py, help.
Perfect.
Now, because we're using Optparse and because we created the OptionParser here, you can see that our program automatically displays a help message when we type help. This message provides us with usage instructions, saying we can use this program by typing macchanger, py followed by the options. The options are H or help for the help message, or the option I or interface for specifying the interface. This matches what we said earlier, and the help message is displayed as we configured, letting the user know they can set the interface to change its MAC address. This is exactly what we wanted. In the next lecture, we'll learn how to add more options and how to use the values the user inputs into our program.